Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the White House is escalating its attacks on the judicial branch as it faces new legal setbacks in a number of cases and a strong rebuke from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. This afternoon, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt blasted judges who rule against the White House, maligning them as activists who are trying to usurp presidential authority and derail the president's sweeping agenda. Listen.
The judges in this country are acting erroneously. We have judges who are acting as partisan activists from the bench. They are trying to dictate policy from the President of the United States. They are trying to clearly slow walk this administration's agenda, and it's unacceptable. As the President said last night, we will continue to comply with these court orders. We will continue to fight these battles in courts, but it's incredibly apparent that there is a concerted effort by the far left to judge shop, to pick judges who are clearly acting as partisan activists from the bench in an attempt to derail this president's agenda. We will not allow that to happen. And not only are they usurping the will of the president and the chief executive of our country, but they are undermining the will of the American public.
Leavitt's comments come as more Trump allies lash out against judges who've ruled against the administration, including Elon Musk, who this morning called for those judges to be impeached. Yesterday, the Supreme Court issued a rare statement through Chief Justice John Roberts, stating that impeachment, quote, is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. When asked about that statement, President Trump noted that Justice Roberts did not mention him by name and doubled down on his criticism of the judge who blocked his use of a rarely invoked wartime authority to deport alleged gang members without due process, while also mischaracterizing the judge's ruling.
But many people have called for his impeachment, the impeachment of this judge. And he actually said we shouldn't be able to take criminals, killers, murderers, horrible, the worst people, gang members, gang leaders, that we shouldn't be allowed to take them out of our country. Well, that's a presidential job. That's not for a local judge to be making that determination. And I thought it was terrible.
Going forward,
I had judges
would you
that were
defy
so
a court
corrupt.
order? Because that we all know that was outrageous.
I never did defy a court order.
And you wouldn't in the future?
No, you can't do that. However, we have bad judges. We have very bad judges, and these are judges that shouldn't be allowed. I think at a certain point you have to start looking at what do you do when you have a rogue judge. The judge that we're talking about, you look at his other rulings.
Now, Judge Boasberg had initially given the government until today to respond to additional questions he had about whether the administration had complied with his orders. He's extended that deadline now until tomorrow. The White House, meanwhile, has faced a number of legal setbacks and other challenges to its actions. Yesterday alone, a judge blocked the Trump administration from banning transgender people from the military. A separate judge ordered DOJ to reinstate computer and email systems to the U.S. Agency for International Development. And a third judge blocked the EPA from terminating billions of dollars in climate grants. NBC News White House correspondent Aaron Gilchrist joins me now. Also with me is NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach. Thanks to both of you for starting us off. Aaron, so the courts have been the only real pushback that we've seen against this administration. Does the White House see these rulings as a nuisance or a major roadblock? What do you think? What are your sources telling you?
I think nuisance would be more accurate of a description of what we've been getting from the White House in terms of how it's reacting to some of these actions that are happening in court. You remember that there have been dozens of challenges to some of the executive orders and memos and actions that President Trump has taken, some of the things that DOJ, Elon Musk and his team have done across agencies in the federal government. In each instance, we're seeing this pushback, the DOJ going to court and fighting the challenges to these orders. As we talk to officials at the White House and President Trump himself, they indicate that they believe that they are operating within the authority of the executive branch, within the authority of the President of the United States. At the same time, we are continuing to see these little efforts sort of pop up that the administration is trying to fight back on. We are seeing instances, for example, of employees who've been fired. We think back to those probationary employees who were fired across the government in so many cases. And now we see, particularly at the Commerce Department, where they've had to reinstate some probationary employees. You think about folks that work for the National Weather Service, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration under the Commerce Department. reinstated but not given their jobs back in terms of showing up for work again. They've been placed on paid leave. And so this is the way that the administration is pushing back on some of these challenges, following some of the court orders, the letter of the law, if you will, but still moving forward with what President Trump ultimately wants to do: cut budgets, downsize the federal government. We know this reduction in force effort is something that is starting to rev up. We've seen that in some agencies, Kristen, and ultimately that will be the administration will be able to use that reduction in force, following the regulations that dictate how that happens, to make sure that they are able to downsize the government.
Well, it is a really complicated process that's playing out. Let me ask you, because we saw this extraordinary rebuke by the Chief Justice, John Roberts, yesterday. How is the Trump administration responding to that? Do you get the sense that that's having an impact?
You know, they've been very careful not to lash out at Chief Justice John Roberts. You heard President Trump in an interview last night say that the statement that we got from the Supreme Court didn't directly address President Trump. We heard the White House press secretary say today that President Trump has a lot of respect for Chief Justice Roberts. Stephen Miller, one of the president's advisors, said the same thing just a few minutes ago out on the White House North Lawn. At the same time, we've heard the administration, as you noted earlier, talk about these other judges, these federal district judges who've been issuing restraining orders and pausing actions by the administration, referring to them as partisan activists, saying that they are undermining the will of the people, and suggesting that the belief of the administration is that it is willing to fight all of these cases, if necessary, up to the Supreme Court. But they believe the Supreme Court should take some action to rein in these activist judges, Kristen. And so I think that's the narrative that we'll continue to hear from this White House. It will be interesting to watch how it plays out if and when some of these issues, maybe not all the cases, but some of these issues make it to the Supreme Court, and then the highest court in the land has to make a ruling. If a ruling goes against the White House or what the administration is trying to do, how then might that play out? It'll be interesting to watch.
It sure will be. Aaron Gilchrist, thank you so much for your great reporting as always. Gary Grumbach, let me turn to you. I know you've been watching the Justice Department, the reaction. They issued a statement in response to Judge Boasberg's request for more answers about the Alien Enemies Act, writing, continuing to beat a dead horse solely for the sake of prying from the government legally immaterial facts and wholly within a sphere of core functions of the executive branch is both purposeless and frustrating to the consideration of the actual legal issues at stake in this case. Talk a little bit about what's behind that statement and what the DOJ is hoping to accomplish there.
So you'll remember just yesterday, the government actually answered questions that Judge Boasberg wanted them to answer. Several questions about how many people were involved, how many members of the gang are still in the U.S., what times things happened. So today, the judge is asking 5 new questions, and now the government is very upset with this. They feel like this has gone too far. They call it a, quote, micromanagement of immaterial fact-finding. But these questions are not terribly difficult questions to ask. They're questions like, what time did the plane take off? What time did it leave U.S. airspace? What time did it get into El Salvadorian airspace, right? These are not classified information on its face. And so this is something that's going to be played out now in the courts before Judge Boasberg as they ask for a stay of his own ruling. And
you've had a busy day because there have been some other machinations within the courts. Talk a little bit about what you're following, including a lawsuit filed against the White House by the United States Institute of Peace.
Yeah, so I was actually just over there at the court. The hearing is still ongoing as we speak. It's an emergency temporary restraining order hearing that's going on before Judge Hallen. It was important to note this Institute of Peace is a completely independent organization. It's created by Congress, not part of any agency or department across the federal government. And that's really important here because the Institute of Peace is saying that DOJ unlawfully broke into their building, physically got into their building, and 3 different police agencies helped them do that because they are part of the federal government. There's a big fight in this case over who is exactly managing the Institute of Peace. Is it the DOJ, the person from DOJ who has now taken over, or is it the person who was in charge just a week ago?
And there were a number of legal actions taken yesterday, including blocking the administration's attempts to ban transgender Americans from serving in the military. Talk about the status of that.
So that has been banned by this judge, but it's also been stayed by this judge, which means paused. So that order is not currently in effect until Friday. This judge knows the government is going to appeal this case, but she was saying this is an equal protection clause issue. It's an absolute constitutional issue, and Kristen, I am sure we will see this go up to the Supreme Court.
Okay, well, I know you will watch it every step of the way. Gary Grumbach, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm joined now by Ty Cobb, who served as White House attorney in President Trump's first administration. Ty, it's always great to have you. Thank you for joining me. Really appreciate it. Let's dive right into this. The administration clearly seems to be testing the boundaries of its authorities with this Alien Enemies Act. I'm curious, in your legal opinion, do you believe the White House is acting within its authority?
No, I mean, the White House and the Justice Department clearly are trying desperately to hide the facts that demonstrate compellingly that they defied the court order and ignored it. As Tom Homan said, we don't care what the judges say. As Vance said, we don't care about the courts because they don't have an army. This is a totally lawless administration with no respect for the courts or the rule of law.
Well, you have said that you do not take President Trump at his word when he says he won't defy a court order. And so the question is, what recourse is there within the system to stop him? What happens?
That's an excellent question. I mean, in order to pursue criminal contempt, you would need the assistance of the Justice Department and presumably the FBI or the Marshal Service. There are civil remedies, though, civil contempt remedies, and ammunition available to Judge Boasberg should he decide that sanctions are necessary. But yes, never before in history has a president defied a court, the way that or disrespected a court the way that this administration does. I mean, having creepy Caroline Leavitt, trying to talk about this judge as somehow a leftist Democratic judge when he was originally appointed by George Bush, and when he when he was the judge who ordered the release of 14,000 Hillary Clinton emails that had been secreted by the State Department and were being unlawfully withheld, when he chastised the FBI for misrepresenting and deceiving the FISA court in connection with the initial Russia investigation under Comey and McCabe. This is a judge who plays it straight down the middle. He's ruled very decisively for Republican-leaning positions and very decisively for Democratic-leaning positions, making it plain that he is not an ideologue. This is somebody who follows the law, and he's done so with great character and great success, rarely reversed.
Well, you talk about Caroline Leavitt. I want to play a little bit of her sound, and of course, we had President Trump raise the issue that he thinks Boasberg should be impeached. Chief Justice John Roberts said no one should be raising the issue of impeachment. Let's take a little bit of a listen to what Caroline Leavitt had to say.
The president has made it clear that he believes this judge in this case should be impeached, and he has also made it clear that he has great respect for the Chief Justice John Roberts, and it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to rein in these activist judges. These partisan activists are undermining the judicial branch by doing so. We have co-equal branches of government for a reason, and the president feels very strongly about that.
Ty, you make the important point that he was obviously appointed by a Republican president. What's the impact of having the press secretary come out and make those types of allegations and charges?
Well, this is part of a well-orchestrated plan, by the administration to denigrate judges that rule against them and resist him at all. But keep in mind that, Article 3 is there as a balance to Article 2 authority for the presidency. The Article 3 courts are obligated to apply the rule of law and make sure that, the president and the executive branch complies with it. And that's what's being done here. There's a lot of misdirection, For example, the attempted narrative that, that the White House has put out through the president and others, including Caroline Leavitt, is that, Trump is somehow preventing, the deportation of murderers and thugs who, have no business in the country. Well, that may be. There are statutes that apply to that, including arguably the Alien Enemies Act, although There are significant reasons why it doesn't apply. Primarily, A, we're not at war, and B, they aren't a country. This is not we haven't been invaded by a country, which is a requirement under that. There are other laws, though, that also apply, including the Alien Terrorist Removal Court, who could easily, act on the administration's desire to rid the country of these people. There's a legal process. What the White House is complaining about is they can't do what they want at the speed that they want because, there are laws. And then she also complained that, Trump is the object of 67% of the injunctions that have ever been issued against the president. Well, 100% of murderers that have got the death penalty, the reason they got it was they were guilty. The reason Trump loses is he plays out of bounds. He's out of bounds today. He's out of bounds with Judge Boasberg. He'll be out of bounds in other matters. This is a battle that is going to go on until it's corrected at the ballot box or through impeachment.
Well, you speak about, the ballot box, and you take me to my next question, which is that there has been a lot of discussion, and the president himself has joked about the possibility of a third term. And some of his allies seem to be very serious about it. I want to play you an exchange with Steve Bannon, one of his former advisors who's now an outside ally, and I want to get your reaction on the other side. Take a look.
You have anything to do with putting your name in that list because you have presidential ambitions?
No. And President Trump, I'm a firm believer that President Trump will run and win again in 2028. So I've already endorsed President Trump. A man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
You're a smart guy. Oh, he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
So putting aside Steve Bannon, I know you have your differences with him. Just speak to the legality of what he said, Ty. He says, we're working on it. They're going to look at the definition of what a term limit is. What do you make of that?
So I think this is one of the real difficulties in reporting on these events. I mean, we've got clearly unqualified people in a variety of positions in the government now for the first time in history. The Kash Patels and Pete Hegseths of the world, and taking advice, constitutional advice, particularly from a twice convicted felon like Steve Bannon, once pardoned, twice convicted, currently on probation. I think that sort of shows how sad things are in this country. Steve Bannon is clearly wrong. The Constitution prohibits more than 2 terms. They undoubtedly will try, because they have no respect for the Constitution, to do whatever they can to prop Trump up for a third term. And we'll hear about this constantly for the next 4 years. But that's not going to happen, and the courts will prevent that. On the other hand, Trump proceeds as though there are no restraints. Trump believes and is certainly attempting to prove that he can do whatever he wants. And that's where the real urgency is for the Article 3 judges to do their job, which I believe they will. And sadly, there are three pieces to the government: the Congress, the courts, and the presidency. Congress is neutered by cowardice, and so it's really the courts against the president. And the courts are starting to, make it plain that the law requires Trump to step in line. And the issue is, as you point out, will he? We'll see.
All right. Ty Cobb, this will be an ongoing conversation for sure. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's great to see you.
Well, great to see you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.